Well, it's back to school time, at least as of this recording. It's middle of August. You guys are probably out there doing your shopping for your kids, the students in your lives. Maybe you are a student. And have you ever wondered if you might have been smart enough to attend an Ivy League college? Maybe you did, and maybe this doesn't pertain to you, but maybe a lot of you kind of look back and think, could I have done it? Was I smart enough to go to Harvard or Yale or the Harvard of the South, the University of Virginia? Well, I'm going to help you answer that question for yourself this morning with this little Ivy League college entrance exam I have. And there's only one question. Now, here's your question. What is this? I'll give you a close-up. I'm going to give you a few seconds to answer here. What is this? It's a little bit of flesh around the edge there is going to give it away for those of you who are particularly observant. Okay, time's up. Turn in your exams. Did you say this is a peach pit? Because if you did, you were right. And that does not necessarily preclude you from being smart enough to attend an Ivy League college. You still might be smart enough to get in if you knew what this was. However, if you did not know what this was, and if you said that this was well, let me explain. Don't worry, if you got it wrong, you still might be smart enough for an Ivy League college. So, as many of you know who have been subscribing to this channel here for a while, up until just recently, I'd spent 6 months as a mailman in Charlottesville, Virginia. Beautiful town, love the people. My favorite part of that job was dealing with the people of Charlottesville, the very wonderful people. They'd give me water, cold water on hot days. Anytime I run into them, they generally had a pleasant word. Well, let me tell you, you will meet some of the smartest people in the world in Charlottesville. You know, a lot of them have advanced degrees. There's doctors, there's lawyers, there's professors. And shut up, Roger. You don't have to take my word for it. A lot of them will tell you how smart they are. So, you know, you don't have to listen to me. I met this one woman one time. She was a 4th generation UVA college grad. Now you trace her family roots back, you're going back to the 1800s, I guess, when her family began attending the university. And I was out, there was this one neighborhood, there was this particular house that always caught my eye because it was for sale, and I couldn't understand why it stayed on the market for so long. It had a beautiful yard, beautiful fruit trees, beautiful gardens. They were kind of grown up. So anyway, I go through this neighborhood and the yard is cleaned up, it's weeded, the trees are being trimmed back, and I thought, this is great. Somebody bought the house, the for sale sign's gone and everything. So I go around to the side of the house as I'm making the turn around the corner there to go over to the next street, and here's this wonderful woman. She's probably in her early to mid 50s. She's down on the ground pulling weeds, and so I just said, well, hello ma'am, how you doing? Did you buy this house? And she looked up and she said, no, my son and his wife just bought this house. They are 5th generation UVA graduates. And I thought, wow, well, that's great. We got some really smart new neighbors here in this particular neighborhood. So she's weeding. And I said, well, that's great. You're out here helping your son and daughter-in-law get the yard cleaned up and get it ready to move in. And she says, yes, she's been out here weeding all day, and her husband's in the back, and he's doing this and that. And she's telling me this beautiful love story about how her and her husband met at the University of Virginia all these years ago. And, you know, they both graduated at the top of their class because they're so smart. And their son is just as smart as them, and he met his wife at the University of Virginia. And just a beautiful story. And I'm just looking around at all the trees and the fruit in the yard, and I said, you know, ma'am, your husband or your son, he's smart, obviously, like his parents, and he's got good taste because this is a beautiful house. And you know, my wife and I, we're big kind of into horticulture. We grow trees and fruit, and we have gardens, and I'm kind of envious. This yard has it all, and you got all these beautiful fruit trees everywhere. And she says, yes, and there are nut trees galore, and there are pecans everywhere, and I just love pecans. And so I'm looking around for the nut trees, and I'm thinking, wow, did I miss something? Because I like nuts too. You know, we've got walnut trees in our yard, and we've got hickory trees here around the outer line of the forest. So I'm looking around, and I said, well, ma'am, I don't see these pecan trees. Where are these pecan trees you're talking about? She rolled her eyes. She must have been thinking, you idiotic mailman. And she says, why, you're standing right underneath the pecan tree, of course. So I look up, and I see all these itty bitty peaches. This was very, very late spring, early summer. I see all these teeny tiny little peaches that are just now greenish and starting to get a little bit of fuzz on them. By this time here, August, I could probably go back there and get peaches the size of baseballs full of juice. I mean, it was a beautiful peach tree. And I said, well, ma'am, I'm just missing this pecan tree. Oh, I swear, I'm standing underneath the peach tree. And she looks at me and she just rolls her eyes again. And she says, well, you look at this. And she holds out her hand, and she just had a handful of peach pits. She said, I've been weeding underneath this tree for an hour, and I'm finding pecans everywhere. And I looked at it, and I said, ma'am, no, I know you graduated from the University of Virginia and all that, and I just went to some itty-bitty old state college over there in West Virginia, but, well, ma'am, I declare I think you've got a handful of peach pits right there. And she looks at it, and she thinks about it for a minute, and I think it kind of dawned on her what she had in her hands. It wasn't pecans. So she stood up and she fixed her hair, and she said, well, it's just as well. My son has nut allergies. And she just turned around and walked into her house, or her son's house, and her daughter-in-law's house. So I would have liked to talk to her a little bit more. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. But I guess the point of this story is, folks, is that even if you got this wrong, if you couldn't tell that this was a peach pit, and maybe if you thought it was a pecan, or a pecan, however you pronounce it, you still might be smart enough to go to an Ivy League college. I mean, just so you'll know, don't count yourself out. And for what it's worth, I'll tell you, that was one smart neighborhood. That woman was not to be outdone by her neighbor across the street. As I was working my way back to the truck, I go by a house, and there's another wonderful lady. This lady was a little bit younger. She's probably about my age, early 40s. And she comes up to the gate, and I didn't have any mail for her, and she says, how come we never get mail at this house? And I said, well, ma'am, I don't know. This isn't my normal route. I'm an assistant, and I'm on a different route about every day. And she says, we bought this house more than a month ago, and we've never received mail. And I said, well, ma'am, did you have your mail forwarded from your last residence? I mean, where'd you move from? And she said, we haven't moved. We still live at our previous residence. We bought this house for our son. He's attending the university. I said, oh, well, that's... okay, so did you have your son's mail forwarded? She goes, well, of course not. She says, he still gets mail at home. This is just where he's going to go. He's going to live here while he goes to college, and we're renting some rooms out to his friends. So actually, his friend's rent will pay our mortgage. I'm like, wow, that's really smart. And she goes, yes, I know. We're both smart, my husband and I both. But where's our mail? I said, okay, so you didn't have your mail forwarded? She says, no. I said, have you ordered anything to have sent here? And she goes, no. And I said, well, ma'am, what sort of mail is it you're expecting to get here? And she thinks about it. And she says, well, I guess I don't really know, but doesn't every house get some kind of mail? And I said, well, ma'am, there's this stuff called standard mail. You would know it as junk mail. I said, sometimes that's not address specific. Sometimes it's just to local resident. I can keep some of that there at the office. A lot of carriers hate to take that out, and a lot of them just don't even take it out. I can go by and grab a handful of that next time I'm on this route and stick it in your box for you if you'd like. And she thought about it for a minute, and she said, no, that's okay. That won't be necessary. I said, okay. And she said, well, you have a good day. And she turned around and she walked off. And I went on my way, and I finished my route. Went home to my family at the end of the day. So I could just imagine those two ladies. I hope they've met each other. You know, they're right across, well, their sons live right across the street from each other. But I'm sure they'd have an enjoyable time going down to one of the Starbuckses on the corner there. And maybe if one particular Starbucks didn't suit them, maybe they could just go over to the Starbucks on the opposite corner there and have a coffee and talk about whatever smart people talk about. So I just thought I'd share that story with you this morning. My wife brought me home some lovely peaches from the store last night, and I ate one, and I was standing there looking at this peach pit, thinking about how I guess that lady was right. It does kind of look like a pecan, or a pecan, however you want to pronounce it. I remember that story, and I just thought I'd share it with you folks. So I hope this gave you a good laugh this morning. I hope it kind of bolstered your confidence and let you know that even if you never went to an Ivy League college, maybe you could have, if you passed or whether you failed the Ivy League college entrance exam here this morning. And I would like to ask each and every one of you that if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, Homesteading Off the Grid. And I will see you next time. I'm going to give you a wonderful parting shot of the homestead.